Okay, good evening, and I'm here at the classroom because I wanted to use the whiteboard because there are some questions in regards to a couple of the assignments. So I wanted to do this. I did email in your Canvas email a link for live streaming. So if you wanted to go ahead and connect, please feel free. I am going to try and get some of this stuff situated. I was all set up in another room, and then I finally got the email, so a little bit of a change right now. I have to resituate myself. Okay. The first question I want to answer is in regards to the assignment of the genogram. So I'm just checking here, kind of, but not quite. So just to kind of review a little bit, if you've done this, that's fine. If you want to and haven't turned it in yet, but you have, this might help answer some questions for you. The All right, just trying to make sure that if anybody is on, that okay, your genogram is due on April 28th, and so a couple other things I need to get going for you guys as well. If you needed the literature review, if you're able to find them, that's great. It's fantastic. So, with the genogram, and you can use to get the symbols. I believe I showed this to you last week. So I'm going to pull it up here. All right, let's switch to, so you get to see here the Therapist Aid is the website, therapistaid.com, and they have, these are in the public domain, so they're free, and they have a lot of different worksheets available. And we'll look at a couple of these here this evening. So let me just see if I can find the one I'm looking for to help you as far as a diagram, the different symbols to use. Okay, well, anyway, therapistaid.com. And they have this sheet that has, and I showed this to you last time, the sheet of paper that has the different symbols for you and things. What you are to do, what I'm asking you for, is just to chart your family for 3 generations. Basically, and the symbols are there with this, that the male is a square, so you have a square to represent the male, a circle, the female, all right? Now this right here is the grandparents. This is your grandparents, all right? So this would be, and what you're doing is you're charting both your mother and your father. So this is the grandparents for your father. If you have it for your mother, that's fine. This is for your mom. I'm not that concerned, other than the fact that when you draw this out, and if they remained married, that's the line, all right? Now, for my family, my father, and for my mother, this is my dad's. This right here is my father. Okay, and for my mother, and this is my mom. So you'll do this right here. Okay, you do that right there. Now, you need to see here too, because should have done it like this. These two on my mom's side, those two right there are twins. So the line comes down and goes right there. For that, they were identical twins and things. So this indicates that they are no longer living, that they have died. You can put the age that they were when they died, the age like 92, and I believe, let's see, 81. I think she was 89. He was 78 or 79. So that's the age that they died. The X indicates that they have died. This is this is my dad. This is my mom. My parents are still married. So from this, okay, and this right here is me. That right there is me. So the idea is to chart your immediate family. It does give us the fact of our aunts and uncles, but we don't trace it out any further than that. And let me see how well this shows up. Change it strictly to the camera. So the idea is to follow yours for 3 generations, as I said. It's not necessary in this assignment that I'm asking from you. It's not necessary in this assignment to chart out anything with your aunts and uncles. I'm looking for just your immediate family in this. I hope that you can see that. And this is my family tree for 3 generations. This is me. I have 2 sisters and 2 brothers. This is my dad, this is my mom, and this is my dad's parents and my mom's parents. So this is where my dad is in the birth order, this is where my mom is in the birth order, and this is where I am in the birth order. So that's what I'm basically looking for and things. So it's not necessary to follow out the aunts and uncles, it's not necessary. Now, the one thing that I would say that could be important with the aunts and uncles one thing I could say that would be important for the aunts and uncles is if there is, like right here, there's any type of addiction or abuse or divorce or different things, separation and things, and it exists at this level too. Now, when you're working with families and you're doing this genogram, that can become a possibility of an important thing to keep in mind as you're working with clients, with families, is the fact of how does these relationships outside of yours impact the rest of the family. Remember that we talked about the systemic approach to family counseling. The systemic approach to family counseling. And here again, what that is you're looking at this whole thing as a system, how that you relate in all of this, but also it's not neglecting the individual in this system. I'm sorry. So you look at the person, or the person wherever level you're at with this. Let's say this family, this husband and wife come in for counseling, and there's possibility of abuse at this level here, or there's actually a separation, a divorce, okay, and maybe a separation here. So you look at this, and the mom and dad are struggling in their relationship, but let's say that at this level, as he is married to somebody totally different that doesn't fit into this, but let's say that his wife, do it like this, his wife and him have divorced. Then over here, let's say that one of these, and I believe that is, okay, it's supposed to be a dotted line. So this is a dotted line because it indicates, as I'm drawing here, a house that they're cohabitating. But this husband and wife right here, they're still married, the family is still intact, but there's these different issues that are here in this family. So if you're counseling at this level right here, this stuff here is important. But all I'm asking from you is just basically to chart yours for 3 generations. I'm not concerned about this out here, okay? I hope that makes sense to you. Please feel free to email me on this as well if you have any other questions with it. So, as I said, in a counseling situation, it can play out differently. It can play out differently. But this is to give you an idea of how to do this type of project, an idea of how to do it. Therefore, these symbols are imperative for you to get a greater understanding of where your clients are coming from. So I hope that that provided an answer for you in regards to that. So it's just you, your mom and dad, their siblings, and your grandparents. That's all I'm asking for on that. All right. To answer another question, or to explore, it's kind of a question and things. There it is. All right. Last week, I mentioned the fact of this story that's on page 90, and I didn't realize that on ebooks they're not the same. So thank you for sending that question to me, and you said it answered it, so I'm glad that it did, and things. So with this here, to write up a treatment plan for this, but also to explore this case study. When you're looking at a case study, you're basically looking at it from a counselor's perspective. To get the idea and to practice with the fact of looking into this to try and catch everything or understand everything that is possible. Now granted, with this one here that the author gives to us on page 90, it is limited, and he intended to do that because that's not where he was going with it. But I picked up on it to proceed in a direction that I wanted you to be able to practice and hone some of your skills to develop you as a counselor, or to better your skills as a counselor as well. When we look at this story, even though it is a short one, when we look at this, let's look at some things to try and get some greater understanding in this. I appreciate the one here that was sent, and great job for that. All right, so I've highlighted some things in here, so I'm just going to go through this to kind of give us an idea. We're assessing right now. We're assessing. Unfortunately, this client isn't in our office, but we're assessing with the information that we have. Okay, first of all, she's married. Okay, so she's a married woman, and she has 3 children. She is involved in her local church. Okay, so she's involved in her local church. She has spiritual gifts. What they are, we don't know, but she's using those in her local church. She is friendly. It says there that she's friendly, but she also isolates herself and is fearful. She isolates herself and is fearful. As we continue here, it says she was always preparing for the time when she would be violated by another, and that's italicized word, another man, or her children scarred by the actions of others. So she is, it says that she's always scanning her environment for dangers, okay? So here again, even though you've read it and stuff, as a counselor, this should be one of those things that flares up or it raises a red flag to you. What is she fearful for? What, and then uses the term violated by another man, so we're going to naturally conclude something, but we just shouldn't jump to conclusions. We should let the client tell their story to us. It says she lived in battle-ready vigilance that verged on paralyzing fear. Okay, that's a key component right there too. And she's battle-ready, but it verges on paralyzing fear. Sometimes it moved into full-blown paranoia, though you probably wouldn't have realized it if you had seen her. So she masked all this, okay? She's keeping all this submerged in a subconscious way, or possibly just at home, so out in public she is putting on a mask. She is putting on a front. She is trying to display that everything is fine, but deep down inside, things aren't okay. So in the next paragraph, we are introduced to the reason why paragraph 1 is the way it is. In her early teens, she had been sexually violated. Okay? So this is the reason for the information that we have in paragraph 1. She had been sexually violated. The extent of that is it's unknown to us, but it's a sexual abuse. Either way you look at it, whether it be type 1 or type 2, is still sexual abuse. From that day on, everyone seemed to wear a mask of her abuser's face. Everyone seemed dangerous. So here with the everyone seemed dangerous gives us the reason for the battle-ready mode that she is in, and how that it actually verges on paralyzing fear. It also tells us why she isolated herself and was fearful. Gives us a good indication for this, because everyone seemed dangerous. In this scenario right here with this case, it was especially with this right here, and it's not just with women, because men could feel the same way. They, as it says at the second sentence in the first paragraph, is she isolated herself. They withdraw because of everyone seems dangerous. There's no trust there in the community, and she probably felt more secure, more safe in the setting of her church than she did out in public. She imposed, it goes on, it says, she imposed the mask on every man she met, because doing so somehow made her feel more prepared and protected. She generalized from the abuser to all men, and that made good sense. The abuser was a human male, and she should stay away from human males. Okay? Now with this right here is the reason for the paragraph 1, as I've said, but it also gives us a little bit more meaning into her actions. All right, what she's actually doing, why she's doing it. Okay, not only what she's doing, but why she is doing it. The last paragraph, it says, she came to know Jesus in her late teens. That's a good thing. She heard the story of Jesus' love for women who were otherwise rejected. Now see, this term right here, let's just say that this is her word because of the sexual violation that she encountered as a teen. Okay, now it says that in her early teens, up there in her early teens. Now this is something that as a counselor, you would want to find out how old she was. Because down here in the third paragraph it says in her late teens she came to know Jesus. So what's the time frame between the two events? All right, so what's the time frame between? We don't know. It's not given to us. It just simply, this is something to ask, questions to ask. Okay, she heard about Jesus, she got saved, and it goes on and says, how could she resist? It's a good question. She was safe. He was safe and compassionate. Okay, Jesus was safe and compassionate. All right, but because of the second paragraph, things in her life will change. Okay, but over the next few years, as she continued to experience hardships and vulnerability, she gradually imposed the mask of her abuser on Jesus. All right, now we have a reason for the fact of why she did this. Okay, so hardships. She experienced hardships. We're not sure what those are. This is something that you can ask as far as a client sitting in your office. Please explain. Well, help me understand these hardships that you experienced. The vulnerability. Okay, did the hardships create the vulnerability because it was a difficult time and all of a sudden you felt exposed when the possibility was you were not, but because of the hardship and because of everything that we already know in the first paragraph and the second paragraph, the vulnerability is naturally going to follow suit on hardships. And then what she's naturally going to do is all of a sudden start to change in her relationship to Jesus, and starts to put this mask of her abuser. So what the mask is actually a kind of a visual representation of the man that abused her, and she places that on people. Okay, that's how she stays away, because that is bad. That's a person that's intended to hurt me, and I'm going to stay away. She turned to him less and less. Jesus was a male, and in her eyes, he was increasingly human. All right. So with this, and we have these facts of information here to help us. Okay. Now, to create some things from this, as far as a treatment plan, we can list these things out that I've already mentioned as far as the key points into the development of a treatment plan. Key points into the development of a treatment plan. But there are some things here that I wrote down that I want us to consider as well. When we think about this case, let's consider this as well. Okay? So, first of all, not that we're going to, but what would you diagnose her with? What would you diagnose her with? And why would you diagnose her with these? Because I asked this question of myself. Okay, here's a person that in her early teens, she was sexually violated. She's a married woman now. We don't know how old, but she has 3 children. She's married. Okay, now that in of itself is a big step, or it can be a big step for somebody who's experienced sexual abuse. We just have the information that she had been violated, sexually violated, so we don't know the extent of whether it was once or twice or multiple times, how many times or whatever. But what is she suffering from? What has she experienced? What would we diagnose her with? Well, first of all, we can look at, and let me get it here. Okay, we can look at the diagnosis, or get a greater understanding of PTSD. When you're developing a treatment plan, you want to know what you're actually going after, okay? What you're trying to work with this client on. What are the issues that they're struggling with? And the reason why I came with PTSD is because of the violation, the sexual violation. All right, so here's some criteria for PTSD. It says, first of all, exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence in one or more of the following ways. Okay, so with this right here, right from the very beginning, we can say, okay, she has experienced sexual violence. Okay, because it says she had been sexually violated. And as a teen, early teen, and just what it all gives to us, and I know that this is kind of speculating because it's not there, and it's a dangerous thing to speculate. Okay, very dangerous to speculate, but just for teaching aspects here, we speculate that this sexual violation occurred to her by an older man, and that he forced it. Okay, that he forced it. So it says exposure. The first thing it says exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence. All right. So whether it's threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence, in one or more of the following ways. The first one, and here's the one or more, okay? Directly experiencing the traumatic event or events. All right, so she meets that one. She meets the fact of sexual violence. So we're taking the sexual violence here And we're exploring this to see, does she meet it right here? Okay, yes, because it was perpetrated on her, so she directly experienced the traumatic event. All right, the second one, witnessing in person the event or events as it occurred to others. No, she doesn't fall into that. That one doesn't line up with her. Learning that a traumatic event or events occurred to a close family member or close friend. In cases of actual or threatened death of a family member or friend, the event or events must have been violated, must have been violent or accidental. That doesn't meet what she's going through either. Okay, so the fourth one, experiencing repeated or extreme exposure to aversive details of the traumatic event, such as first responders, police officers, or other people such as that nature. Okay. Now remember that it said that all she had to have was one or more to meet that part of the diagnosis. Right. So she does, directly experiencing the traumatic event that happened to her. All right. It happened to her. And here again it says early teenager. And in order for this to actually apply at this level here, it says the following criteria applies to adults, adolescents, and children older than 6 years of age. All right, so she was in her early teens, so this matches up, and we find that PTSD is there. All right, so we can look at the fact of PTSD. Now, when you're going to work with that, okay, that's one thing. So you have this right here. So this is one aspect of it. Another thing to think about too is it was a traumatic event. So you could be dealing with trauma along with it. Okay, two different things that we can be dealing with here as well. And because of these right here, another one is naturally, is closely related to this. Is depression, right? Is depression. And with that, in of itself, one of the things that made me come to that conclusion was not necessarily PTSD or trauma, but it says that she isolates herself and she's fearful. Okay, the isolation, when people are struggling with depression or experiencing depression, they tend to isolate themselves. Okay, they tend to isolate themselves. So we see this right here as three possibilities of things that we need to develop a treatment plan for: PTSD, trauma, and depression. We can also, I didn't write this down too, but just some of the things here that is in this, okay? And I'll give you another word here after I write this up. Okay, anxiety. Anxiety. This is given here in this first paragraph. It is also given in the second paragraph. All right, she's a married woman, contributes to her local church. She isolates. She's always scanning her horizon, her environment for danger. She is always preparing for the time when she would be violated by another man. There's anxiety there. There's anxiousness there. Just in that statement itself, just in that sentence alone, there's anxiety, there's anxiousness. Okay, she lived in battle-ready vigilance that verged on paralyzing fear. They're still dealing with this right here. This is going to become part of it, but now we're still in this right here with the anxiety, right? And sometimes it moved into full-blown paranoia, right? So, 4 different things that we can develop a treatment plan on. 4 different things that we can develop a treatment plan on. With this story, as the author unfolds this story for us, this word came to my mind too as I was reading through it, and going to help you guys with an answer to some of this on this story here as far as developing a treatment plan. Okay, this word came to my mind. Hypervigilance. Hypervigilance. I see this throughout the whole story itself. Hypervigilance. Okay? Another thing that I see in this, and it's not here, another thing that I see in this that as a counselor you need to be aware of too, is the fact that not only these things for her, but how is all of this translating into the family? Okay? How is all this translating into the family? Should we consider, and this isn't going to be known to us until we actually do an assessment, but should we consider, after we've started working with this and everything, that we bring in the family, especially the husband, into this counseling session? Because this isn't in the story, but we can see that all this stuff is going to can play on the dynamics of the family. It can actually hinder the relationship. So we need to keep in mind that this is for her, and we might need to consider the family as well. So this becomes another part of the treatment plan too. But this is what we're going to look at first. All right? So hypervigilance, coming back to this. Hypervigilance. Got sidetracked there a little bit. Okay, hypervigilance. I grabbed a dictionary to look it up and see what it meant so I could give you a better explanation or definition for it. Hypervigilance is defined as extreme or excessive vigilance. Extreme or excessive vigilance. So when you think about hypervigilance, the person is extreme in their vigilance, or they are excessive. With her, she's putting a mask on every man. She even put a mask on Jesus after she experienced some hardships and vulnerability. So she's hypervigilant, and she's taking these things to this event in her life is becoming more dominant in her life, and she's taking it to the point of hypervigilance, to the extreme, to excessiveness. You have to admit, that not all men in this situation, not all men are evil. Not all men are evil. But to her, and this is the thing to keep in mind as a counselor, to her, they are. They are, because she hasn't been dealing with some things in her life. All right? So it is. So we have to start to develop and work with the fact of changing her thoughts, her thought process. Okay, so extreme or excessive vigilance. It goes on to say the state of being highly or abnormally alert to potential danger or threat. The state of being highly or abnormally alert to potential danger or threat. Now, to stay an alert, to being highly alert to potential danger, we would put that and accept that for military personnel who are actually out in a combat zone or even in an unfriendly zone, right? They need to be vigilant. They need to be highly vigilant. But the thing is they're trained for that, so they know what to be looking for. In this case, there's no training here, so it does become extreme and excessive. But we see it in a normal way for military, for police, for firefighters, first responders in the medical field and things. They need to be alert to potential dangers or danger, right? But they've been trained for that, so it's not abnormal. The abnormality comes when we're not trained for it and we become excessive in our alertness. And most of the time, like with her case, okay, now the potential danger, we cannot deny the reality of that in her thinking. Okay, we can't, nor the threat. We can't deny that because it has happened to her, so she feels more vulnerable, she feels exposed, she feels unsafe, so that she's going to practice this. Now, there's no training at this point in her in her life to be able to overcome this, to bring it back into a normal way of thinking and living life. So I see hypervigilance here. I see hypervigilance here. I found this also in regards to hypervigilance. Okay, found this also. And the thing about hypervigilance is the fact that this is key to know in this type of situation, because as a counselor, you're going to actually be receiving a possibility of pushback on the things that you're doing to try and help her overcome this. Because of that hypervigilance, there might be some pushback in your therapy plan. And that's one reason why you incorporate the client into the development of a therapy plan as well. Okay? So you can possibly be experiencing some of this through that. But here's a couple other things I found in light of hypervigilance. Is a state of being constantly tense, on guard, and exceptionally aware of your environment. State of constantly being, and it's a state of being constantly tense. Okay, now, just as a side note here, that in of itself is an unhealthy place to be. Physiologically, that's an unhealthy place to be, the tense part, right? Now, to be on guard, now here again, if you had been trained for these things, then it's not that way. But not being trained, as most of us, when we get into a hypervigilant state, we're not trained for it, or it would not be a hypervigilant state for us. Okay? Exceptionally aware of your environment. Now, they're aware of it, but here again, they're aware of only specifics of the environment. They're aware of it, right? For her, every male that walks into her field of view, she's going to be in that not only tense, but on guard. She's going to be in a guarded position because of what we have as information here. She's going to be on guard. And she's exceptionally aware of her environment, but only aware of the fact, okay, here comes a guy, there's a guy, or whatever, or something else along those lines too that creates this awareness for her. Another thing I found out in this is when I was looking up these definitions and stuff, it said it's the brain's way of protecting the body from danger. Hypervigilance is the brain's way of protecting the body from danger. It's interesting, and this is another part of your education as far as the biological basis of behavior and how biology is a big part of things that we do and think and stuff. So it's the brain's way of protecting the body from danger. Just some interesting things I wanted to give to you to help you understand some things, all right? And to give you some insight into, okay, let's explore this. Let's look deeper into this. Let's not forget some things that are actually there in front of us at this time. So these are the things that I pick up from it right here. These are the things I pick up. She's suffering with PTSD, there's trauma, there's depression, there's anxiety. Now each one of these can be a separate treatment plan, all right? But we're going to incorporate all this into one. Now, coming over to this side, it's not necessarily needful, but we don't know that because the information is not given to us, but it's not necessarily needful to have the 3 kids as a part of family counseling either. We bring in mom and dad first, husband and wife first. We work with mom and dad and see what happens from there if we need to bring the kids in. All right, but more than likely we don't need to, but she is very protective of her children. She's very protective of her children. She doesn't want them to experience what she experienced. Kudos to that. That's very good, okay? You don't want to, and in fact, you could look at her and say, that's fantastic. I appreciate the stance that you take as a mother in protecting your children. You're to be commended. So you praise her on that. Nothing wrong with that part. The other parts here is what creates problems, okay? Is what we need to bring into her life as a healthy way. As a healthy way. Now, let's break this down a little bit further. All right, let's break this down a little bit further. I hope that this is not boring to you, and in reality, I actually wish that you guys were sitting here. Okay, I wish that you guys were sitting here because I know that you would probably have questions. All right. So, if you remember, I talked about long-term and short-term goals. Long-term and short-term goals. This might be better right here. Okay, so long-term and short-term goals. Right, what the long-term is, okay, when we develop a long-term goal, we're looking at now plus down the road. And down the road could be of the such of when they leave therapy. It's still a goal when they leave therapy. This is for a continual process, a continual growth in their life. Okay, so let's think about anxiety at first, okay? So let's think about anxiety at first. We can do this for all of them. Okay, so with anxiety, one of the things you can say is a long-term goal. One of the things you can say is a long-term goal is to increase understanding of the anxious feelings. You can do it as far as with depression. Increase in understanding of depressive feelings or depression, right? So you can do that with those two, right? Now we could go, and that would be a long-term goal number one. A long-term goal number two, okay? Address the underlying issues with depression and anxiety. Address the underlying issues. Here's a long-term, okay? It's a long-term goal. It's a long-term goal. And we'll get to the subpoints to this also. Okay, let me back up, let me correct myself, okay? Let me back up, let me correct myself. So let's deal with depression first, okay? In fact, before I get into that, because I'm going to make a correction here, so before I get into that, it's 10 minutes till 7. Let's take a 10-minute break, okay? Come back at 7. I'm going to take a 10-minute break. Okay. Approaching these as far as development of a treatment plan. Now, you might be thinking, what does this have to do with non-traditional family? It has a lot to do with it, because this is part of the counseling of a non-traditional family. A traditional family is husband and wife that are married, stay married, and they have however many kids, whatever, and that's a traditional family. This doesn't exist a whole lot in our, it's there and it exists in our society, but it's not as prevalent and it's not as widespread as it used to be in generations past. This is a traditional family. With what we're dealing with when we think about this lady in this story here, it doesn't give us all kinds of information about as far as the family makeup, okay? But it gives us information as far as her early life and the things that she's dealing with. So whether you're working with traditional family or non-traditional family, and let's say that you have, let's say that this is a single mom. Let's say it's a single mom. How about the fact that it's a blended family? That this lady has been married before, or maybe she was never married because of the event, but yet her husband was married before and now they get married, all right? So there again, with that, you're still adding more into the complexity of the treatment plan if it's necessary. It's not always necessary, but if it's necessary. So even though this is a non-traditional family class, is still all these things right here that we're talking about are going to transcend any type of family structure, and to transcend it. So it has a lot to do with it, and a lot of this right here is given to you as far as, and I'm giving this to you to help you develop into a better counselor, to be able to understand and look further into the complexities of the presenting issue. All right? Now, I've put these up on the board: depression, PTSD, anxiety. All right, so here we are, we're looking at these right here. And we're going through as far as the development of a treatment plan. So with each one of these, the first thing you want to do as far as a long-term goal, the long-term goal is to increase understanding of the depressive feelings, increase the understanding of the PTSD. Okay, so this is going to be more along the lines of what is called psychoeducation. Okay, you're educating. Okay, with the and here with anxiety, it's increasing the understanding of anxious feelings. All right, increasing the understanding of these three things. So that could be goal number one, long-term goal number one. All right, long-term goal number two, as far as with depression, is to address issues underlying the depressive feelings. Address the issues that are underlying this. For PTSD, identify and address the events and issues underlying PTSD. This is where you're going to go back and explore that a little bit more into that later. For anxiety, okay, correct irrational thinking. Correct irrational thinking. This story, as it's given to us, there's a lot of that there. Okay, there's a lot of that there. For depression, okay, long-term goal number 3, participate actively in individual and or group counseling. Individual and or group counseling. Okay, participate in this. Okay, for PTSD, this one is correct irrational thinking, which leads to PTSD and interpersonal problems. So we're going to correct the irrational thinking here in goal number 3, long-term goal. Long-term goal for number for anxiety is improved coping with anxiety and anxious symptoms. All right, so we're going to improve coping with these. So those are three that could be long-term goals. Three that can be long-term goals. This one has, as far as for anxiety, has a long-term goal. Number 4 is improve insight, and number 5 is reduce vulnerability. Reduce vulnerability, and it states that she felt that way. So this can be a very important part for this treatment plan with her. And I'm not going to read through all these subpoints because there's quite a bit in each one of them. But under depression, to increase understanding of depressive feelings, all right? So we're going to develop a vocabulary to describe depression, identify cues and symptoms. Identify cues and so develop the vocabulary to describe it. All right, develop the vocabulary. We're going to help them with this, but they might be able to do it on their own as well. But develop a vocabulary, so therefore when they have this vocabulary and these symptoms start to come on, because identify cues and symptoms is the second part, right? So they're able to identify these, they can now verbalize it in a way to describe it better. So it's bringing about, like I said right here with the psychoeducation, it's bringing about that right here with this too, and knowledge becomes very powerful for them. A third point, as far as a short term, identify areas of vulnerability which underlie depression. Here again, vulnerability is a part of this one as well. Number 4, identify triggers to these areas. Identify triggers to these areas, to the vulnerability, okay, and to the cues. What's the triggers to these? Okay, what's the triggers to these? Identify them. Okay, identify them. And then the 5th one, identify antecedents, triggers, and consequences to acting out on depression. Okay, what's the consequences for them acting out on this? The subpoints, for the short-term goals for PTSD under increased understanding is develop a vocabulary to describe it, to describe their feelings, identify cues and symptoms that they are experiencing, link those feelings to specific triggers and areas of vulnerability, develop a short-term action plan for dealing with PTSD. Accept that this person, that her PTSD is causing them problems. This can be a challenge. Link cues and symptoms of PTSD with triggers and with harmful coping behaviors. The harmful coping behaviors, even though it's not mentioned with her, but the harmful coping behaviors are alcohol and drugs. As you can tell, there's some similarities, it's just differences in wording in both of these. So once you work with this and you develop this, it becomes something that you can just change a few words and move in and keep going with it because it's kind of overlaps. All right, with increased understanding of the anxiety, the anxious feelings, here again, develop vocabulary to describe anxiety or fears. 2, identify cues and symptoms. 3, identify areas of vulnerability which underlie anxiety. 4, identify triggers to these areas. And 5, identify antecedents, triggers, and consequences to acting out on anxiety. Okay, see how these overlap and the things are pretty much the same here. So it is kind of daunting when you think about developing a treatment plan. And once you have this, and by the way, I got this and printed it off. I use it. It helps me because sometimes I forget different things, and once I look at this and I can, I can process through this. Here, let's identify cues and symptoms to anxiety, and as we're working on this as far as a short-term goal, I look at it here and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's the next step, and it helps me help them. There's a lot of things, and your memory might be better than mine. Sometimes mine is strong, and there's sometimes when I read this stuff and I'm like, oh, what was that again? But it helps to have this available for you, and I have it in my laptop, and I just can click on it and open it up while I'm with a client and then start the process with them. But a lot of times I take this and I work it into a treatment plan and place it into their file in the computer program, so as they come in to see me and it pops up and I have it there, it's all right there off to the side for me, and I can be working on this by looking over here on the left-hand side and be able to work through these different steps. So once you have it and develop it, you put it into your computer and there it is. The only thing that you will probably do is edit it to make it not only yours, but edit it to the changing in our environment, in our field, as far as improvements to these things. Okay. So that's the first step. That's the short-term part under the long-term goal for each one of those. I want to look more into the short term for PTSD. More into the short term for PTSD. Identify issues of PTSD from the past and resolve or let go. That would be a short-term goal. The long-term is identify and address the events and issues underlying PTSD. So for a short-term goal here, that's the long-term goal. So for the short-term, it's identify issues of PTSD from the past and resolve or let go. Number 2, identify troublesome feelings and symptoms. Identify troublesome feelings and symptoms. Number 3, address current symptoms. And there's a list here, okay? And you'll find this in the DSM. You'll find it in other things that have PTSD as far as working with it and developing a treatment plan, or just some of the things as far as the criteria for PTSD, right? So address current symptoms. The first one is intrusive thoughts. Intrusive thoughts. Second one, flashbacks. Third one, trauma-related fears, panic, and avoidance. The next one, numbing, detachment from others, loss of interest in life. The fifth one, irritability, angry outbursts. Now see, that was one that we didn't put up either. It was the fact of with this scenario, we could be needing to deal with anger as well. It's not mentioned there. There's nothing that led me to believe that. But when you think about PTSD and some of the things that are in there, angry outbursts are a part of it. The next one, general anxiety. Okay, just as a general whole, anxiety as a general whole, and by the way, it is a diagnosis in the DSM as far as general anxiety disorder, okay? Sleep disturbance. And the last one they have here under address current symptoms is difficulty concentrating. All right, difficulty concentrating. Now, if you remember in one of our, either the first or second class we had, I mentioned the fact about being eclectic. I believe I mentioned that here, but eclectic, being eclectic, and that's taking things from all the different types of treatment therapies that are out there that are going to work at the time that you need them and things. So when they have a list here of different therapy things to do, all right? Exposure therapy. which is nothing more than a slow progress of exposing them to what is troubling them. Like, for instance, if somebody has a fear of spiders, okay, a fear of spiders, so the exposure therapy is going to get them and move them into challenge, okay, it's a challenge. You start off with the fact of telling them to think about a spider. They're nowhere around, they're just sitting in your office, and this is part of the exposure. Think about it. Okay, think about it. Now, I want you to write the word spider, okay, and you progress forward to the fact that you actually show them a picture of a spider. You don't bring a real spider into them and say, here, touch it and things, even though you could if you wanted to, but that's not what I would do. So exposure therapy, all right? Then cognitive restructuring is another one. Cognitive restructuring, okay? Their thought process is not the way it should be. It's irrational. So you want to reconstruct their cognitive pattern. And there's formulas out there for reconstructing cognitive patterns too. So we have exposure therapy, we have cognitive restructuring, then we have coping skills as well. Coping skills. So those are the ones that they have here as far as different types that you can use, different types of therapy models you can use for PTSD when you're addressing current symptoms. They go on, and here's another short-term goal. Identify grief and loss issues. Take initial steps toward managing grief. All right? Initial steps towards managing grief. This is where something like this book here comes in very handy. All right? Now, this is a good book to have, and I've already mentioned that to you guys. It is part of your reading, right? Because here again, when you think about a non-traditional family, this right here deals with if that scenario that I put up here and one of the spouses is dead or dies, now you have a non-traditional family. There are also, and at the very first class I had those 17 names on the board, and I sent that out so that those who couldn't see the board had that available to them. One of the names on that was a Gottman. Okay, Gottman has developed a certification for grief therapy. You can become specialized as a grief therapist. So when you're working with somebody in whether PTSD or whether just the simple fact of grieving, you need to be able to work with them intelligently. As might have happened to some of you, but it happens to people on a regular basis. They go to visit a family member or a friend or somebody from church that has lost a loved one, and they go there and they start talking to the person, I know how you feel, or whatever, and stuff like that. A lot of times we say things when we go to visit somebody who's experiencing the death of a family member or something. We open our mouth when sometimes we shouldn't open our mouth. We should just sit there at times and just let them talk to us when they want to talk, because sometimes they just want a listening ear and things. So different ways to get better at counseling somebody with grief. So that's one of the short-term goals as well. Another one, identify client symptoms and sources of guilt. Identify client symptoms and sources of guilt. How does this play into it, okay? The one thing about guilt is it's either a fact or it's not. If it's not a fact, then guilt is not there. Shame might be there, but guilt might not be there. Guilt, if the fact is true, and a lot of times, a lot of these people that suffer with PTSD, the guilt is there, but like with this story here that our author gives us, we don't have any indication that she did anything to cause this perpetrator to do what he did. So she shouldn't feel guilty. Okay, now she is experiencing shame, but she shouldn't feel guilty if she didn't do anything, and this was just an event that the guy overpowered her. She didn't do anything to lead it on. So we explore that. Another short-term goal is reduce guilt, increase understanding of responsibility for the event. All right? Increase understanding of responsibility for the event. With this individual here that's not there, once again, as I've already said, but we don't know that there's any responsibility that she has to accept. But in some of these situations with PTSD, there is the responsibility factor. Another short-term goal here. Identify and address issues of isolation and avoidance. Effects of the, that's one, and then number two, effects of the of past abuse or trauma. And then the last short-term goal under this long-term goal here, identify symptoms and sources of hurt. Identify symptoms and sources of hurt. So this kind of gives you an idea of the development of a treatment plan. It was lengthy, but I hope that this information actually provides and gives you assistance on the development of a treatment plan. The long-term goals are long-term, not only in therapy, but beyond therapy, as it says right here, okay? Increase in understanding of depressive feelings, or with the PTSD, or with anxiety. So when you increase an understanding of this right here, they're able to take that beyond therapy. It becomes knowledge for them. They know and understand. So you've educated them. You've educated them so that they can actually go out and begin to live a normal, healthy, functional life, because they understand that they got a greater understanding of these feelings. You've identified them. You've given them these different ways to not only identify the cues and the symptoms, the vulnerability, triggers, okay, the consequences of the stuff. So when they think about this, there's that right there. Okay, that's a trigger for me, and I probably should stop right here and not go there, because that's a trigger, and I know what the consequences are going to be, because if I continue going in that direction, then this could possibly happen. I've been there before. I don't want to go there. Things are better now. So they avoid it and they move on. So long-term goals are always intended to go beyond therapy. And in a lot of situations, and this is not meant to be a negative type of thing, okay? It's meant to be the fact of the reality of life. In a lot of situations, okay, this becomes an issue, but with the knowledge and ability, it doesn't always have to be an issue, but it becomes an issue that is lifelong. Okay, it's lifelong. People can get over depression, they can live a healthy, normal, functional life, but it doesn't mean depression is never going to come knocking on their door. They're going to experience it at a time or two. They might fall back into it just a little bit, but once they start to realize, hey, my counselor told me this and this, and I'm seeing that, and I need to make adjustments to it, and I can get out of this place. And a lot of them do, okay? A lot of them do. So depression, anxiety, even when you think about PTSD, all right, these things, those are developed as memories, or, you know, whether it be a first responder, a policeman, even somebody in the medical field dealing with a life or death situation, or it's a military personnel, or you're the victim of abuse, whatever type of abuse it is, okay? Those things form memories. your brain, I've said this before, so I don't want to repeat it a lot, but your brain is an incredible organ within your body, and it has the ability to store things. Now, the body can suppress things just for the purpose of protection, okay? Protecting the rest of the body, so it can hide it, it can repress it, it can put it down deep within, and you can think that you forgot it until something happens and it creates a trigger, and here it comes back again, and it hits you, and you're like, uh-oh. But as long as you as a counselor have helped your client through this in a way that is educational, that is supportive, that is long-lasting, even though you might not see them for a while, but you want it to be long-lasting, it's beneficial. They can learn how to, hey, I remember my counselor and stuff. You might have in your career, you might have a client that you've worked through, let's say depression, or with this lady here in our story, you've worked through these, and you've been down this road with her, and you've diligently, and she's been diligent about doing the things and applying these principles to her life, changing her life, changing everything about her, and she progresses, you discharge her, and years later she might call you and just say, hey, you know, I was kind of struggling again, can I come in for a visit? Sure, why not? That's what your job is for. That's what you want, is for them to be able to come back, because they know that you're going to be beneficial to them, you're going to help them, and they are going to once again learn how to live a healthy life again. So clients can call you back even after you've discharged them, and sometimes they might call you back relating to a totally different topic. They might call you back and say, hey, Mr. or Miss Counselor, you know, I thank you for what you did in my life, everything's going well, but I've been talking to my friend, and I've been telling him some of the things, or her some of the things that you've taught me and stuff like that. Would it be okay if they call you? Stuff. So that's a great referral source. Or, you know, they might say, I've been talking with my friend and stuff, and I can't remember exactly how you said it, you know, and what you did and stuff like that. And you can give that information to them. You're helping that person help somebody else. And they become an instrument that God can use. You're just expanding your influence and things. It's not for us, it's for the client, but it's ultimately for the glory of God, and that's one reason why we do what we do, is because there is a ton of people out there, literally, and even now in our society, what we're dealing with now in our world, there's a ton of people out there that are struggling. They're struggling. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to do, let alone where to go. But once a contact's made, then you become a vital tool and part of their life to help them change and develop. Okay, I want to. So that's long-term, short-term. I know it took a while, but it's good to draw it out. It's good to see it. It's good to have it and understand it better, so that when we're doing it, it becomes kind of almost like I said, almost like second nature, but we're not going to remember everything, so put it in a computer file that you have it readily available, and once you put it where the client's information is, and you pull that client up, there it is, and you can work from there and stuff. So it's an important part of the client's development and mental health. Healing aspect and things is an important part. Remember this too about a treatment plan, is even though you place it in those parts of your computer and things, doesn't mean that it cannot change, because there might have to come changes with it. You might actually have to alter it some as they progress, right? As they progress, and they can progress in such a way that you're just like, I'll touch on this, I'll share it with you, but you've progressed in such a way that you're moving well, and it's not necessary, but let's look at it anyway, so that you're developing them, you're continuing that education process. So, it's not set in stone, all right? It can change, it can alter. And you can write a totally different diagnosis with it as well, and develop a whole total different treatment plan. So that's the reason why I wanted to draw it out, and because a student had a question about it, so I hope that through this that your question was answered. Here again, if not, please shoot me an email and I will answer it, do what I can to help you in this process and things. All right, continue along the lines of as far as working with individuals and stuff. When you think about, well, let me do this. All right, when you think about, because this being a class that's counseling a non-traditional family, and let's say that you as a counselor are involved in marriage counseling, or you're involved in premarital counseling because they're coming to you to, you know, just to get this premarital counseling. The other book that's your textbook is your second marriage and things. So when you're working in that regards, as far as marriage counseling or premarital counseling and things, each of us, whether you as a student that I'm talking to that's not here through the camera and YouTube, I know that some of you are married and I know that some of you aren't. But each of you are going to enter into this part of your life, into marriage, when the Lord brings that person, or if you are married and you've entered into already, you've entered into a married state. You are married, you become one with this partner of yours. You actually came into that with your own ideas. With your own ideas. And as you're reading through this book, and also a book that's, even though it was typed up by mistake in your syllabus, all right, a book that you do want to add to the one that you have as far as your second marriage is actually the author's first book on saving your marriage before it starts, the first one that they authored on this, okay? So get that one as well and have the second marriage, because you're going to be working with people that are going to be experiencing their first marriage. You're going to be working with people that are going to be experiencing their second marriage and or third, okay? So you're going to be doing marriage counseling, and each person's going to come into this state, into this union with their own thoughts, okay, with their own preconceived ideas. So they're going to come into it with their own thoughts. And a lot of those thoughts are actually going to stem from their family. Or their friends. Okay, we're going to get our own ideas, our own thoughts, our own ideas okay, ideas about marriage, our own thoughts, our own ideas from family or friends. We could add books or movies. Each one of these, there might be a couple other things we add to it as well. Each one of these are actually going to help create this or this. So when we enter into marriage, whether it's the first time, second time, third time, we're coming in with our own preconceived thoughts and ideas. Many of us have read what the Bible says about marriage. Many of us have, but we still develop our own thoughts. A lot of people have developed their own thoughts and interpretation of Scripture. Okay, so you're going to develop your own thoughts, they're going to develop their thoughts. It's going to translate over to emotions. Okay, it's going to translate over to emotions. Our thoughts to emotions. It will also translate over into behaviors. Right? You're going to go both ways. It's going to go one way, but here's the neat thing about it too. Even though I started off with thoughts, even though I started off with here and said that it's going to translate over to here, that it's also going to do that. The interesting thing about this right here is sometimes when we think about marriage itself, we're caught up into emotions, and the emotions are going to translate over into our thoughts, and those thoughts are going to become our behaviors, and our behaviors are going to come down to our emotions. Or it might be going up to this way. Our emotions are going to have an impact on our behaviors. We're going to do things based upon our emotions, and then we might think about it later. Okay? Didn't really mean to say it that way, but it kind of came out that way. Because a lot of times, and here's something you'll find in counseling with families, or counseling in general, is this right here has a big impact on that right there. And a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, this will influence that, and then this comes into play. And when you think about marriage, maybe you know somebody like this, okay? They got caught up in emotions and they said yes at the altar. That was their actions and behavior. And then later they thought, what did I do? Why did I do this? Now the later is later, whatever time frame it is as far as later, okay? So this right here, okay, this right here is basically a functional part of humanity. A functional part it's a functional part of humanity in a lot of ways. This is where we at. This is basically where we live. But this right here, are going to become structural. Knew it wasn't right. Okay, structural. Okay, our function, this right here, comes down to our structure, the structural part of us, which here is our core beliefs. This is our core beliefs. Our core beliefs and our schemas, okay? Core beliefs and our schemas. And I have that. No. Okay, our schemas, what are they? What are they? Okay, this is our functional part. This is our structural part, our core beliefs and our schemas. So what are schemas? Important beliefs and feelings about oneself, others, and the world that are accepted without question. Okay, they're accepted without question. Okay, when you think about, and just for an illustration, okay, important beliefs and feelings about oneself, others, and the world that are accepted without question. So when you're thinking about, as I've started off here, with a marriage counseling scenario, right? Some people hold the belief, or might, might believe that, okay, yes, I love this person. Yes, I want to marry them. Yes, I want to stay with them for the rest of my life. But, all right, another person might say, yes, I love this person. I want to marry this person. I want to stay with them for the rest of my life, and there's no but. Okay? So these schemas are formed in early childhood or adolescent. They're formed in early childhood or adolescent. They're formed when basic needs are not met. Very important that that be understood. They're formed when basic needs are not met. They're enduring, stable, and self-perpetuating. They're enduring, stable, and self-perpetuating. They operate subtly outside of awareness unless activated. Okay? Unless they operate subtly outside of awareness unless activated. These right here, schemas, okay, like that scenario I gave, as far as yes, I love them, yes, I want to marry them, but, okay, that can be a part of just a subtle aspect of a schema to this person's life, that they don't see that right now until, let's say that, we all know that life is going to be life in a marriage situation, and they're going to experience trouble, and some of it might be difficult. All right, that person that has the schema of the but, I'll just get a divorce, that doesn't show up. It operates in their life until it becomes activated. Until it becomes activated. Okay? Extreme emotions can distort thinking. And extreme emotions, as they distort thinking, can create destructive behaviors. It can create destructive behaviors. So that's schemas, okay? That's schemas. And if I could go down a little bit further, I would, but okay, the other part, which would set down here, would be relational. Okay? Relational. And with relational is actually the longings to be in a relation. It's the longings to be in a relation. Okay? Now, when you're doing counseling with like a married couple, either before, during, or after, or any other person, because this can actually be used in any type of situation, depression, anxiety, PTSD and different things. This all can be used in those types of ways, okay? So with this as a model, okay, relation, you're longing to be in a relationship. Everybody longs to be in a relationship. There's not too many people out there that, you will find some, but if you find them, they're actually operating based upon this right here, as far as isolation, being a hermit or whatever. They don't want anybody in their life and things. So that's very rare, but people were made to be in a relationship. They were made to be in a relationship. So part of your task as a counselor, when this all takes place, okay, so we don't have to, but I'm going to start down here anyway, okay? So with this right here, right? You're going to work with them on a spiritual. Can't even write tonight. Can't even remember either. On a spiritual aspect, okay, they have spiritual longings, so as you work with them through the spiritual longings, right, you're going to be working with them, let's say, because that this part of their structure is not proper, so you can work on them on their spiritual longings. I'll do it like this. All right, that's probably difficult for you to see, so listen carefully and rewind it if you need to. So when you're working with them in this relational portion of them, you're going to be working with them to guide them through their spiritual longings or through their spiritual development, helping them with unresolved conflicts. Okay, unresolved conflicts, this needs to be resolved, so you're working with them through the unresolved conflicts. There might be relational wounds because of the conflicts, okay, so helping them process through these relational wounds. And then you'll be working with them on their character issues, okay, their character issues. So, as this was meant to be under here, now we're coming back to this way, right? So what we're doing here, once again, is we're addressing their core beliefs, all right? Now remember, what I said about core beliefs, it's how we view the world, but we're also looking at schemas, okay? With the schema, it's a little bit more, I don't want to say complex, but just follow this. It's a little bit more complex than core beliefs with the schema, simply because they were formed in early childhood or adolescence. All right? They were formed when basic needs are not met. When basic needs are not met. When you think about these things right here, and you think about basic needs not being met, no wonder we have a different interpretation of things, okay? So relational wounds, I mean, we could end up having a relational wound because of unresolved conflict that actually affects our character because this right here, a basic need was not met. So we're coming kind of like this order now to deal with this as we've worked here, and let's say possibly from the bottom up, so to speak, from the bottom up to get up to a better place up here. So we're working through these things here, and we have to actually say that there are a lot of us, myself included, yourself included, that we need to have things in this area of our life brought back more in line to where it should be. Maybe we're not necessarily dealing with unresolved conflicts or relational wounds, but because this might be out of whack, it's affecting this right here. Or maybe this right here might need some fine tuning because it's affecting this right here. All right, we might not have these right here, but these two things will probably always be in somebody's life, which therefore comes from this right here for the most part. So we work back through this. Now we're coming back up to the functional part. Coming back up to the functional part. So what we're doing as we've worked through this and worked through that, whether it be in a family situation, whether it be in a marriage situation, whether it be in a single parent situation, whether it be just in the fact of a single adult who has no children but is on their own, is struggling with some issues or another, okay? We're working through this. We're coming back up here now, okay? We're at the functional part. We did the reverse as far as the relational, the structural. Now we're at the functional. And what we're going to do here, and it's very simple. Help create new thinking pattern or new thinking skills. All right? And new behavior skills, which brings about new emotions or a better developed emotions. All right? So I hope that you can see it, and I hope it makes sense to you and things. Rewind it, watch it again, listen carefully. I hope you can see it, but the functional, structural, and relational part are the three domains of humanity. Right? Now, that some people might debate that and argue, but we're on a functional level, we're on a structural level, and we're on a relational level. We live in these three domains. They impact us in a lot of ways and stuff. So, all right, I'm going to take a 10-minute break. It's 10 minutes till 8, so I'm going to take a break. Come back in 10 minutes. Okay, 8 o'clock, so I'm not going to go much longer, but I want to, I mentioned last week that I would write a quiz. I was going to change it. It was my original intent, just didn't come together. But I have written a quiz. It's 25 questions. 25 questions that are true false. They're all true false. So the first 10 questions come from the notes that I talked about in our first session and that I also reviewed last week as well. 10 questions from the notes, and the other 15 questions I have taken from this book, Traveling Through Grief. The remaining 15, and they're true false as well. They're true false as well. Read the questions. With any true false quiz test, reading the questions becomes important, well, with any as well, but the 15 questions from here, and double check here because I want to make sure that I'm not going to, give it all away and stuff like that. I want you guys to, I want you to earn it, but I don't want to make it extremely difficult. So the 15 questions, the last 15 questions are going to come from the first 44 pages. The first 44 pages, which is basically the first 2 chapters, but it doesn't even cover the entire second chapter. So 15 questions, the last 15 questions, they're true, false. They come from Traveling Through Grief, first 2 chapters. The first 10 questions come from the notes, the lecture notes that were talked about in the first session that I reviewed last week as well. Went through these notes as well. So that part, I didn't really try to make it difficult. I just tried to make it, I'm not going to say simple, but maybe logical, right? This quiz I will put on Canvas tomorrow, and you have until Saturday to complete the quiz. Okay, Saturday night, you'll have until Saturday. You can use the book, okay? You can use the book, use your notes. So 25 questions, it's worth 100 points. The quiz itself is worth 100 points, so that's 4 points a question. Open notes, open book. And this is the book once again, and the notes from the lecture on the first day and the review last week. I'll put it up there tomorrow. I'll try and get home tonight and put it in. If I do, I'll go ahead and post it. If not, it will be tomorrow. 25 questions. You have until Saturday. Well, let me do this. Let me make it Sunday night. You have until Sunday night. Just make it to the end of this week. You have until Sunday night to do that. Your 4th journal's due today, so I'm not sure everything that you guys have going on, but let's make the quiz until Sunday night at midnight, 11:59, sorry, 11:59. You got your journal for today that needs to be turned in by 11:59 tonight, and then Journal 5 next week on the 14th, the 21st, Journal 6, the 28th, Journal number 7. Also, if you are working through, I hope you are still working through the presentation, even though we can't do that would love to be able to see you guys do that and everything. Still have that and the 21st and the 28th, but I'm going to, we got to do this social distancing and everything, and you guys might be at your own home right now, wherever that's at and stuff, but send it to me, and if you want, and you want to just kind of record yourself doing it, that's fine, but apart from that, just send the PowerPoint presentation to me and everything. I'd love to have been able to have you guys do this in class, just to experience your ability doing a presentation. I think it would have been awesome. I think you guys would have enjoyed it, and we would have had fun with it. All right, your genogram and literature review as well. The due dates are posted on Canvas, and right now I'm drawing a blank on them. So I'll try and post the test, the quiz tonight. You have until Sunday night. If I don't get it up tonight, it will be there tomorrow. And then you have till Sunday night at 11:59. So that's those things. Okay. Now here again, once again, I will do my best to get back with you in a timely fashion. Just please understand that I have a job outside of this too. I do counseling outside of this. So I'll do my best to get with you because I know that this is important to you and everything. So I'm basically spent, tired, thirsty, and everything. So at this present time, you guys take care of yourself, stay safe, and as they say, stay at home and maintain the social distancing. We still get out and everything, but maintain the social distancing. Continue to work on your work, on your school work and everything. And our prayers for you, God's blessings upon you. And students, have a great evening. We will talk to you, and I'll probably be back here in this room doing a live stream feed next Tuesday night as well. So be blessed, have a blessed week, and we will see you and talk to you then.